Donald Trump this afternoon suffering legal and political blows to his efforts to deport individuals without providing them due process. Brand new reporting from the Washington Post today undercuts one of the central rationales for withholding due process. It has to do with a comprehensive assessment made by the National Intelligence Council in conjunction with 18 intelligence agencies. It's an assessment first reported on by the New York Times. The Washington Post today cites people familiar with the matter in reporting that the NIC earlier this month determined that the Venezuelan government is not directing an invasion of the United States by the Tren de Aragua gang. It is a judgment that contradicts not just what Donald Trump has said repeatedly in public, but what the Trump administration has used as reasoning for deporting suspected gang members without due process under the Alien Enemies Act. From that new Post reporting, quote, the intelligence product found that although there are some low-level contacts between the Maduro government and Tren de Aragua, or TDA, the gang does not operate at the direction of Venezuela's leader. The product builds on U.S. intelligence findings in February, first reported by the New York Times, that the gang is not controlled by Venezuela. Now, before you ask, the answer is yes. The Office of the Director of National Intelligence conveniently dismissed these findings as the product of, quote, deep state actors and the media. Of course, all that relates to people the Trump administration is deporting on purpose, intentionally. And that is an important distinction because there are also those being shipped to mega prisons in El Salvador by mistake. And we know that from the Trump administration's own admission. Now, last night, Senator Chris Van Hollen posted this photo. It's a photo of him visiting with Kilmar Abrego Garcia from that El Salvador prison. Senator Van Hollen said he'd called Abrego Garcia's wife, Jennifer, to pass along his message of love. Hours later, she spoke with ABC.
We saw that Maryland Senator Chris Van Hollen, he flew to see your husband Wednesday. He released a photo of the two of them last night. What was it like for you to see that photo?
It was very overwhelming. The most important thing for me, my children, his mom, his brother, his sibling, was to see him alive. And we saw him alive. It was very, very overwhelming.
What were you told your husband said in that meeting?
It was just a message of love.
Now, Senator Van Hollen is scheduled to touch down in Washington, D.C. from El Salvador any moment. He's expected to address the media. We'll bring that to you as soon as it gets underway. In the meantime, the new reporting, the new events are where we start today with some of our favorite reporters and friends. Washington Post national security reporter John Hudson is here. He is bylined on the reporting we just read from. Also joining us, former director of the CIA, now an MSNBC senior national security analyst, John Brennan's here. Plus, Amanda Carpenter joins us. She is a writer and editor at Protect Democracy. John, take me through what you and your colleagues are reporting.
Yeah, so it's a very significant development that the National Intelligence Council, which derives its information from the 18 U.S. intelligence agencies, and its assessment is that Tren de Aragua, this gang that operates across the Western Hemisphere, is not directed by the Venezuelan government. And it's significant because, of course, this is the entire rationale that the Trump administration is using to round up suspected gang members in the United States and summarily deport them without due process. There had been some inklings from the intelligence community earlier in February that were first reported by the New York Times that this was the case. But the National Intelligence Council really building the more authoritative and sort of singular voice of the intelligence community, saying that no, what President Trump is saying and what the lawyers are saying, there's no basis that this direction is happening from the Venezuelan government. government, very significant, especially given that, there are a lot of fears that the intelligence community is being sort of suppressed in some ways by a political appointees who have a different agenda. This is a sign that actually the intelligence analysts are still doing their work and still calling balls and strikes when it comes to the reality on the ground.
John, what goes into this intelligence product? Can you just, for folks not familiar with an assessment and the degree of confidence and the number of agencies that contribute to the assessment, can you do some of that explaining for us?
Yes. So obviously there's, 18 intelligence services that work for the United States, everything from the National Security Agency, which specializes in signals intelligence, the CIA, which does operations and has human intelligence, national geospatial agencies with satellites, and almost universally, the intelligence community found that this idea that the gang is operating at the behest of the Venezuelan government is just not the case. There was a dissenting U.S. intelligence agency in the form of the FBI, which found that there is a moderate degree of coordination that happens between Tren de Aragua and Venezuela, the Maduro regime. But that is not accepted by the rest of the intelligence community. But essentially, the National Intelligence Council's got experts and advisors, and they pool the collective intelligence of the United States government. And so when they put products together like this, it's very important. Of course, what their product was roundly rejected when I brought this up to the spokespeople of the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, which viewed the product, or at least are reporting on the product, as a result of deep state actors working in conjunction with the Washington Post.
John Hudson, do they have 18 separate government agencies that arrive at a different conclusion based on different sources and methods of intelligence?
I mean, this is sort of the unified voice of the intelligence community when the NIC, as it's called, the National Intelligence Council, puts out these products. Obviously, there is room for dissent, and that was the case with the FBI. But this was the consensus position of the U.S. intelligence community.
Director John Brennan, just give us some historical parallels to the other sorts of things that were established with the consensus positions of 18 U.S. intelligence agencies. Because my sense is when you have that much agreement, they tend to be non-controversial conclusions that are accepted by policymakers.
Well, as John pointed out, the National Intelligence Council, the NIC, is a very authoritative body that pulls information as well as experts from throughout the intelligence community. For 50, 60 years or so, it has been responsible for producing the national intelligence estimates. They were the ones that were doing things on the Soviet Union or China or terrorism, other types of things. And so it is an authoritative assessment that is done, and it goes out for coordination. And for 17 out of the 18 to agree fully with the findings, I think that is really quite something. One dissent saying there was moderate coordination between the Maduro government and Tren de Aragua. But again, I think the National Intelligence Council is the place you want to go to if you want to have a coordinated view of an ongoing situation. What I find very surprising is the statement that came out from the Office of Director of National Intelligence saying it's a result of deep state actors. I mean, this is going to not just annoy, but anger the members of the intelligence community, particularly those who work on the NIC, to think that they are being referred to by the Director of National Intelligence Office as deep state actors. These are professionals. These are people with deep expertise, regional expertise, and also, long analytic experience. And so to refer to them as that, deep state actors, again, this is just, disparagement of the intelligence community that works so hard to make sure that they're able to bring to bear all of the intelligence analysis available so that the lie can be shown to Donald Trump's fabrications.
Director Brennan, let me read you some NBC reporting and then ask you a question about this. NBC is reporting that the Trump administration appears to be hurrying to deport more alleged Venezuelan gang members under the rarely used Alien Enemies Act, despite a Supreme Court order that detainees must be given reasonable time to combat the allegations against them. That's according to a court filing obtained by NBC News. It would seem that knocking down an intelligence report that could enter into those court proceedings and knock down the notion that there is any state-sponsored terrorism or crime would certainly suggest that the Trump administration will not prevail in court when and if they provide the candidates for deportation due process as they've been ordered by a 9-0 ruling to do by the United States Supreme Court. If you reverse engineer this, do you feel like the suppression of the intelligence product, which is the consensus of 17 agencies, is part of their effort to deport people while denying them due process?
Absolutely. And it sounds as though some members of Congress have called for the declassification of this report so that it can be used expressly for this purpose to refute the allegations of the Trump administration. And this document, this assessment, is going to carry a lot of weight. You know, policymakers can accept or ignore the findings of the intelligence community. But for Donald Trump basing his decision on the Alien Enemies Act and saying that there is this part of this invasion that was coordinated by Venezuela against us, and showing that the intelligence community, 17 out of those 18 agencies, deny that allegation, I do think it's going to carry a lot of weight and hopefully, again, lead to a bit of a change in terms of what is happening in this country.